Hey, let's have a look at Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu, directed by Jon Favreau. It's pretty simple here, with the Empire in ruins and Imperial remnants scattered across the galaxy. The fragile New Republic struggles to safeguard the peace the rebellion worked so hard to secure. So, in these uncertain times, they seek out the legendary Mandalorian bounty hunter Din Djarin, united with his young apprentice Grogu. Mando sets off across the stars to navigate a hostile galaxy, facing off against new enemies and gathering allies along the way. At its core, the film tracks this duo as they battle to complete the latest perilous mission. Now, the most important context here is that this film arrives nearly 7 years later after the last Star Wars franchise movie hit theaters. Given that long hiatus, expectations were naturally high. However, the end result is quite disappointing. The biggest issue is that it feels like we've already seen all of this in a TV series. When you bring a show to the big screen, there should be a compelling reason why it needs that cinematic scale. For comparison, I watched Mahavatar Narashima. Even though that story is familiar, the big screen experience actually enhanced the impact. With this movie, however, it just feels like an episode projected onto a giant screen. There is no real justification for a theater visit. Furthermore, while the film portrays Mando and Grogu on a specific side mission, this movie itself feels like a side quest for the Star Wars franchise. It doesn't push the larger lore forward. It feels peripheral, lacking the weight and significance we usually expect from a Star Wars theatrical release. And CGI part looks solid in few instances only. It honestly doesn't capture the grandeur of the Star Wars brand. Even with the Disney's massive resources, the environment and the ambience fell flat for me. Perhaps because we're living in an age where high-end AI visuals are becoming the norm. The film's aesthetic just didn't excite anybody in the theater. Even the 3D effects were underwhelming and didn't add anything worth praising. The first Star was at least manageable, the pace was decent and it kept our attention. There was a tournament scene involving a pit fight that was actually quite engaging, but after that point, the remaining 75 minutes were a real slog. I actually noticed people around me struggling to stay awake. Beyond the pacing, there are glaring logic gaps with Grogu. He possesses the Force, and there were several high-stakes moments where he could have easily used it to save himself or the Mando. But he just stood there. It's painfully obvious the writers held him back just to keep the plot moving. But as a viewer, it's frustrating. By the end, I was just waiting for the credits to roll. Also, I'm honestly confused about who this movie was made for. It's too childish to be a serious adult drama, yet it lacks the spark to be a truly captivating family film as well. I'm not a die-hard Star Wars fan, but I'm certainly not a hater as well. And if someone like me found it completely unappealing, I don't see how it's going to win over a new audience. Maybe if you're a hardcore fan, you've already seen previous seasons, so you're going to watch this regardless of what anybody would say. But for everyone else, this movie is totally unnecessary. Even if you enjoy The Mandalorian Grogu, you're just better off just waiting for the next episodes on the TV. They've essentially taken the TV format and stretched it out for the cinema without adding anything new in particular. My final take, don't waste your time in a theater. It's a mediocre experience that fails to capture the magic we expect from this huge Star Wars franchise.